I live by a certain credo, a certain principle, which is that I never let fear stop me from doing what it is I wish to do. In fact, my motto is that if I find I'm afraid of something, it's the thing that's going to make me do it.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of I Know This Guy, the podcast where we dive deep into the lives of some of the most interesting people I know. Before we get started, please like and subscribe to I Know This Guy wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, my kids want me to say something about ringing a bell. What the hell's a bell?
All right. So, Dad, who do we have on for the podcast?
We're going to be talking to Julian Joseph, and this guy, just an incredibly nice individual, world-class jazz musician, radio host. He's got his own academy. He's everything jazz. So I can't wait. I know you've been chomping at the bit to talk to him as well, but I can't wait to talk to him.
All right. Let's dive in.
All right. Well, welcome to the podcast, Julian.
Well, it's a pleasure to join you. It's such a pleasure to be here, Norm. So thank you for inviting me or having me invited.
No problem whatsoever. A matter of fact, Marcello was the person who did recommend you, and he said that you were the most interesting guy that he knows. Before we, usually when we start a program or a podcast, I want to learn more about the person. And so if you don't mind, if we can go back into your backstory a bit, and let's talk about what makes Julian Julian.
Wow, well, that's a $64,000 question, isn't it? What makes me me? I think the short answer to that is my mum. I always think that the confidence that my mother instilled in me makes me me, and I thank her for that. Every day. She's no longer with us, but I grew up in a family with two brothers, John and James. John's my older brother. James is my younger brother. We were all born within 4 years of each other, within a 4-year time frame, I should say. Yeah, we've been tight since we were little and still are tight today. James is my manager. John, he's the biggest fan of music. So we do everything together, really. We're very, very solidly connected. So I guess my sense of family born out of that. And, my mother and father split up when I was quite young, actually. And my dad, he just passed last year, actually, and he lived in Switzerland. And I have another 2 sisters from his second marriage. So, yeah, I guess, family life, music, my drive is really just music, man, playing and composing and teaching and broadcasting. Those are the things that sort of fill my days, if you like. And how much of myself is revealed through that, I guess you will delve in and unpluck.
We certainly will. But when did you know that you had the music bug?
I always say whenever I'm asked the question of, how did you get in touch with music? When did you know that music was the thing for you? Well, I've never ever felt that music hasn't been a part of my life or that it's, my major driving force, the center, the core of my existence. But so I've felt like I've always played, I've always learned, I've always created. I started the piano at the age of about 5 or 6 years old. Really, it was because my mum bought a piano. My brothers and I came back from primary school and saw the piano in the front room and said, "Mum, there's a piano in the front room." She said, "Yep, and you're all going to learn." Because she believed that, a good education, music is essential. So, I grew up playing. I've always felt like a musician. I was really into singing, actually, early in my life. And so many of the things I did were related to singing, whether it was in choirs, singing solos, or whatever came up. So, I developed as a singer, and then I got a little more self-conscious when I went to secondary school, where you go at the age of 11. So I didn't really do too much with the singing, and just focused in on the piano more. Towards the end of school, when I got into the sixth form, where you go, well, when you're heading towards the sixth form, which is around the age of 16, I did work experience at a bank, and I had a great time. But after the first afternoon, I knew that this was not the way forward in my life. Working in any conventional sense. And of course, I don't want to offend any bankers or people who work in banks. I called my mum when I had my lunch break. I said, "Mum, I can never work like this." She goes, "Well, you know what you need to do, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "And if you're serious, I'll back you all the way." And that's really when I confronted what I could do with the rest of my life.
That's very interesting, because if I'm talking to people that don't work 9 to 5, so let's say entrepreneurs, musicians, could be anybody in the entertainment world, I get that answer. And I know I've done that. Like, since I came out of college, I think I've worked a very short period of time for one other person, and it was like, I can't do this. I got, and it's not that it's not a bad thing. It's just, it's just not for me.
To thine own self be true. You know when it's not for you. You just know. Yeah. And it speaks to you loudly.
It does. Yeah. I mean, and I try to tell people, if anybody cares to listen, but if people do ask me about, what they're doing, if they're not passionate, or they can't have fun in their job, or if they don't wake up just ready to go to work, well, find something that you are, because it's a long life. And why go through life when you can't do what you want to do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I think one of the great fortunes of having your own way, your own pathway, or a passion in something, is that the way forward is very clear, even if you don't know exactly what it is you're going to do, but you just know that you want to be good at the particular thing you're passionate about. And it gives you a purpose, it gives your life a purpose, and it gives you a direction. And you always know what it is that you have to do to improve, or to build the skills to do whatever it is you dream about and that you have a passion for. So for me, I really just was passionate about music, and I wanted to develop in that field as far as I possibly could.
People that have listened to this podcast know that my son, the producer of the show, Hayden, he's a musician. He went to Berkeley. I think one of the driving forces for you, Hayden, must have been some of your teachers, especially one in particular. And I don't know if you can speak to that, Hayden.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of two individuals that, kind of changed my life around the age of 15 or so. And I would have never considered a career in music otherwise, or to delve as deep as I do into music. One was a high school teacher, a band teacher. And I think I caught him at the right time. He was brand new to the school, like looking to reform the whole program, and we didn't have much. It was a small town music program. Like, I think the auto repair classes were like the main hit in high school. Those are the classes to go to. But him and my first electric bass teacher really completely opened up my mind to so much of the world just through these lessons. And
teachers are amazing, aren't they?
Yeah.
Inspirational teachers, I should say.
Right.
I think that I feel a parallel in a way, because my primary school teacher, I had a primary school teacher called Mrs. Cornby. I mean, many teachers actually. Mrs. Mumby, then Mrs. Cornby, and her husband Bert, who was this amazing pianist. He could just transform any piece of music. almost like magic. And what he was doing with it was jazz music, you know? So he would play Handel's Messiah and he would just turn it into this massive thing. I mean, yes, he would play the score, but then he would just be able to expand it and make it feel bigger and all of this. And he put all this harmony, this extra harmony in it. I was like, when I mean, I was very young, so me and the kids, you know, my brothers especially, and many of the kids, they just knew and sensed that something great was going on. And I think this just added to the fact that, you know, your fellow Canadian, Oscar Peterson, was such an inspiration, because my mum used to let me stay up late with my brothers to watch Oscar Peterson and his TV shows, of which there were many. And this was absolutely inspiring for me. And also at that time, there was a lot of jazz on television, a lot of music on television, to be honest. So I really knew that the jazz sound in particular really grabbed me. I mean, a little bit later on, I really got into Prokofiev and Debussy and Stravinsky, and you know, these really amazing composers. And when I say later, I mean when I was about 12. so yeah, teachers were really, my music teachers were really at the helm of that. When I went to secondary school, I had this great teacher called Chris Johnson, and he used to play this tune called the 32 C's, and basically it was just 32 C's on a glockenspiel. Used to have a half an hour lesson, and everyone used to just go crazy on these glockenspiels playing these 32 C's. And then he was like, he had got wind of the fact that I played piano, so he said, "Julian, do you want to come and play piano?" I was like, "Sure." He's like, "Do you know what I'm doing?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's cool, I've got it." And I just played his part, and that's. Then afterwards, he let me stay behind, and he used to have a band rehearse and all sorts of stuff. He was this really hip black guy who everyone said, "Oh, he's great. He plays jazz rock and all of this kind of stuff." And I was like, okay. And in his music room, he had this big poster of Kate Bush. So I was like, okay, something different is going on here. And yeah, so I used to hang with him. And after that, you know, some other teachers came in the school, a really talented bass player and composer, and then called Andrew Hardick. Yes, you know, my drum teacher was a great musician called Trevor Tompkins, who's still active on the scene today, teaches in many of the colleges. And then yeah, so teachers have been incredibly inspirational throughout my life. And in fact, it was Trevor Tompkins who said to me, he said, you know, possibly when I was around 13 or 14, you should go to Berkeley. I know that's where you went, Hayden. I was like, yeah, great. Okay. And at that time, there wasn't many provisions to study abroad. Not that there are today. There certainly are, and there should be more. But I was fortunate because I was able to both ensure a scholarship and also from Berkeley, and also get one from educational body, the Inner London Educational Authority. And they made it possible for me to go to Berkeley and study there. So that made a huge difference on the trajectory of my studying after school.
Did you find it different, you know, coming from London, going over to Boston? Just any type of cultural change?
Cultural shock? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was a culture shock for me. Absolutely. I had no idea. I hadn't lived away from home. I had turned 19 when I got to Boston. Really, I didn't have anywhere to stay. I just, I got in, but things happened at such a late stage, and I thought, I'm going to go over there. Maybe I can stay in a youth hostel for a while, or I have a few $100s. Maybe I can stay in a hotel or something. Of course, that was very unrealistic. That money wasn't going to go very far. I was very, very fortunate because I had befriended Mulgrew Miller before I left England. And he said, "Julian, don't worry. No matter what happens, I'll make sure you're okay." And he was very close to the person he had recommended me go to America to study with. That's a long-winded sentence, but I went to Berklee really to study with the maestro and brilliant pianist and composer, Donald Brown. So Mulgrew, understanding that I didn't really have anywhere to stay with any permanence, sent Donald Brown to pick me up from the airport, sort of see what was available. And when nothing really was available, Donald Brown took me into his home and I stayed with him. And luckily enough, only for a few days, because my mother had a teacher of hers who lived in Boston and was the reverend of the Methodist Church. And he said, he came to pick me up, young man, welcome to Boston. And he took me to his home. I met his lovely, lovely wife, Mrs. John, Faye John, who became my mother basically in the US. And she said, Julian, welcome home. And that's really how I got into America, because I didn't really know what was happening. And they helped me sort out halls of residence and just get settled in. So I was really blessed. I had some guiding spirit watching over me, mostly my mum and mostly Mulgrew Miller. So yeah, I'm a supremely blessed man.
How'd you meet Mulgrew?
Well, I went to see him at Ronnie Scott's club, and he was playing with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. And at that time, I think he had just recorded on Branford Marsalis' first record, contributed a tune called No Sidestepping. And so, I was really excited because he extolled the virtues and sounds of McCoy Tyner. He had, elements of Woody Shaw, who he'd played with for many, many years. Just had a wonderful sense of the tradition in his playing, but just with something different, something very personal. So I went up to him and I said, hi, Mulgrew. I was probably about 16 or 17. And I said, yes, my name's Julian. And I saw in his eyes, they lit up when he saw me. I said, yeah, I'm Julian and I play piano as well. And he said, as well as what? So just to break the ice. And he said, when you walked in, you reminded me of this young cat who plays piano too, called Bernard Wright. And I was a huge fan of Bernard Wright, who was this 16-year-old wunderkind who played just the most beautiful piano and funk and on all of this kind of stuff. He's the guy playing I don't know if you guys know Tom Brown's Funkin' for Jamaica, but that whole track has a synth bass. And the guy who's playing that synth bass is a 13-year-old called Bernard Wright. So I reminded him of Bernard Wright, who I was a huge fan of and still am actually today. So yeah, that's how I met Mulgrew. And then I invited him to come back and hear my group rehearse at this workshop that I went to that was led by a fantastic trumpet player called Ian Carr. And he had several bands. He had this band with Don Rendell in the 50s. And then he was one of the pioneers of fusion with a band called Nucleus. So we would do this workshop with Ian, hooking us up with all this music. And then afterwards, because I was writing a lot, I had been writing since I was 10. So I had myself, Courtney Pine, Mark Mondesi, a whole bunch of guys there. And we just used to rehearse. And I brought Mulgrew to hear us. And then we were playing Moose the Mooch. And we couldn't quite execute the tune because it's a really difficult tune. And then he said, Julian, is that some kind of arrangement? I said, no, we just can't play the tune. And he sat down and he played it for us. It was just a wonderful moment. It was just such a wonderful moment. So after that, Mulgrew became a very close personal friend. He came to my home and, my mom would feed him. And he got to know my brothers and we just hung. And he was like a big brother to me. He used to take me on the road with him and the Messengers. And, I used to just see all those guys. And that was when Terence Blanchard was in the band with Donald Harrison, Jean Toussaint, Lonnie Plaxico, and of course, Boo himself, Art Blakey. So those guys actually wrote me a reference, which is how I got to Berklee. They wrote me a reference. Having a reference from Art Blakey is pretty cool, right?
Oh, well,
it's a long-winded answer, I know. Sorry.
No, I loved it. And what's interesting with Berkeley, I found out I was in the military for a very short period of time, but my buddies are still my buddies today. I can call them, and probably I'm just kind of interested. Your relationships coming out of Berkeley, are they tight?
Yeah, I mean, they're tight. I've kept in touch with, a few people there. And I mean, I was very tight with Delphio Marsalis when I was there. I was tight with Javon Jackson, all really great jazz musicians. I was tight with Roy Hargrove and Antonio Hart. We used to call him Tony back in those days, but Antonio is what his preferred nomenclature is. And Jeff Keyser, all of these guys. Jackie Terrasson, who's half French. Also another guy called Alain Mallet, and very, very tight with Danilo Perez.
Oh, yeah.
So, a lot of these guys are friends that, it stood the test of time. But, I was friends with many other people as well, because I'm mixed across the board, Japanese players and, guys from rock and roll. I in fact roomed with a fantastic musician called Gino Leonardo, who is the lead guitarist and major songwriter with a fantastic band called Filter. So yeah, I made and forged many great friendships when I was there, and many of them I still can call up today and say, what's up, guys? But really, after about the first year, I started playing with Branford. When Kenny Kirkland couldn't make some gigs, I used to play with Branford. And so Branford is probably one of the tightest friends that I have from that period of my life. Of course, he had graduated from Berkeley before I got there, and his younger brother Delphio was there, and we were good friends. But I'm very much in touch with Bran.
So how did you manage the leap from studying from Berkeley to touring with the Marsalis brothers?
I was doing it while I was there, so you just manage, don't you? I said you try to prepare as much as you can. You go on the road, and then you go back and then do the finals and then go home and then go on some more tours with Courtney Pine and Steve Williamson and Cleveland Watkins. So yeah, I was busy, man. I was just busy. I had a great time while I was at college. I'd just always be out, I'd always be out on the road. So it was really, really good. I did spend some good quality time there. But yeah, it was a mixture between being there and being on the road, and met lots of great people through Branford, So I had met Branford and Winton before because they had played London with Herbie Hancock, and I went backstage to see Herbie, who was my absolute hero back in those days, and met Winton and Branford when they were 21 and 22. Playing with Ron Carter, Tony Williams, and Herbie Hancock. And
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Must be nice just to hang with those guys.
I was a fan. Understand that. I was not hanging with them. I was a fan, just, happy to be in their orbit. But as you may or may not know, I mean, Hayden knows this, that jazz musicians are very, very, outwardly helpful. And anyone interested in the music, they'll give you their number. They'll say, call me. They'll pick up the phone when you call them. They'll give you advice. And so I was very fortunate, because also having known and being friends with Mulgrew and Donald Harrison and Terrence, they're all part of a brotherhood, I guess, a civilization of really kind, generous jazz musicians. So I felt that I was in that fold, and that, they were just really all like big brothers to me.
When you were in Boston, you got to travel all over the place. Were there any highlights, any cities that kind of stood out in your mind? Like maybe, traveling to New York, the scene over there. Any cities or places that just stood out that you just loved? Or didn't, maybe?
I loved all of it, even the bad stuff, because, the first thing I did was Delphio said to me, look, Branford needs you to play on a video he's making. And I said, okay. I mean, let me just give you the build up. I mean, I don't want to make this all about that, but about a term in, Delphia said to me, look, man, Bradford needs you to fill in a gig because Kenny Kirkland can't make it. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do that, man, because he either plays with Kenny Kirkland or Herbie Hancock. What am I going to do? You know? And he said, no, Bradford wants you to come. So I flew to Jacksonville Jazz to the Jazz Festival in Jacksonville. Oh my God, I was just in awe. Tane was playing drums, Delbert Felix was on bass, Bradford, of course. Now Bradford's only 26 at this point. I'm 19 years old, you know, but the world loves him as it does now. I'm basically in shock. He's like, what tunes do you know? I'm like, I know this, corny. I know that. No, that's corny. We're not doing that. I know this. And he goes, oh, well, you're just going to have to hear it then, aren't you? I was like, oh my God. I was thinking to myself, I don't know any tunes. I don't know what I'm going to do. We go to the hotel. I'm basically mute because I can't speak. I'm so overawed by the situation, by everything, how quickly all of these things are unfolding. So I get in the bus and Bradford turns to me, he goes, don't you even talk, man? I'm like, we get to the venue and we're walking to the stage. I mean, this is all like a blur to me. And I'm walking from backstage to go on and play with these people I've admired since, you know, I was I'm still a teenager, but since I was a young teenager. And, you know, lo and behold, who's coming off stage, coming the other way? Miles Davis, right? And he's like, hey, man, you know, I'm like, oh my God, it's Miles Davis. What? You know, yeah, man, all right, I'll be listening. I was like, oh no. So, you know, go on stage. It's 20,000 people out there, cameras, everything.
Oh.
You can find it. It's on the net somewhere. And we play, and oh my God, you know, I managed to hold on. You know, it's an outdoor venue. We play this original Herbie Hancock. It's called Number 73, which I'm sure you've never heard of. And so I'm trying to navigate this music. And of course, a gust of wind blows the music and it just goes all skew whiff. And I'm like, oh my God, this is brilliant. This is just great. So, you know, that's my first experience. And then Brad says, you know, and he's like, yeah, man, well, you managed, didn't you? I'm like, did I? He said, he said, you know, well, what do you think? Do you want to come on the road with us? I'm like, he said, like, well, I said, I'll have to ask your mom. He said, well, call your mom, tell her, you know. And so that was my initiation into playing with him. I always feel, actually, when I played with him a few years ago for Joey Calderazzo, and I felt exactly the same, to be honest. You know, I felt exactly the same. I mean, a little more experience, but, you know. So anyway, Delphio says to me, I got through that ordeal, and Delphio says to me, look, Bradford needs to play a video. It's like, okay, I'll go, you know. So I fly to New York. I've already experienced Jacksonville. I fly to New York, and so we go on set, and the person directing the video is Spike Lee, right? And I'm just thinking to myself, oh my goodness. And he'd just blown up big because She's Gotta Have It had come out, and, you know, my head was spinning, right? So my recollections of the cities are always attached to some unbelievable thing that happened, you know, playing Jacksonville, playing in Miami when I met my Uncle Robert for the first time. I hadn't seen my dad for a long time, not since I was a young boy. So I saw my Uncle Robert, and he reminded me exactly of what my imagination of my father was. So yeah, I had so many things that were triggering my imagination and my life there associated with these towns. So I don't know whether the towns managed to have an impression on me, or whether they were just triggering things because of the incredible circumstances that I found myself in, just being able to, you know, either sinking or swimming or doing a mixture of the two. You know, that's really how those cities were affecting me.
Wow. Geez, and just getting to know all these guys, that's that's incredible.
Very lucky, to meet them and to I guess some of something rubs off somewhere, and you realize that we're all just human beings trying to do things to a lesser or greater degree than each other, than one another.
So you've managed to weave together education and performance, broadcasting. It seems seamlessly in your life. How did that begin? How did you achieve this?
Oh gosh, it was certainly not my plan. When I got home after graduating from Berkeley, I was very fortunate to sign with a subsidiary of Warner Brothers called East West Records. And so it was East West in Britain, Atlantic in the US, and, some other subsidiaries in other places. So, my career, as a performer took off at that time. I was playing and being around all of those guys that I'd been around, and, growing up with my mom, correcting my English every time I was on the radio, telling me what my grammar was about. And, I was like, but Mom, it's just the way I talk. Yes, well, improve it. I was like, okay. And then, the BBC just called out of the blue and said, what used to happen in addition to, my gigs was that I would get calls from various producers saying, would you come in and read for a show, or would you come in and present something for us? And so I was always a guest, talking about jazz or talking about music. And then eventually, I think it was in 1999, this is quite a few years in now, a new controller had come to Radio 3, Roger Wright, and Felix Carey, my producer at that time, said, look, there's a show called Jazz Legends that we'd like you to present, or that I'd like to pitch for it with you as our presenter. I was like, okay. And I went in and I read for it. I can't remember what the show was that I prepared, but I did that. Then I got the broadcasting gig, and I've been broadcasting now for over 20 years since that show. So yeah, very, very fortunate. And out of that, I started presenting some television programs, and, it's just one thing on top of the other, really. So yeah, but just between that, the education thing came a little bit later, because I'd always, in jazz, in music now, often there is an educational component attached to the performance. So from time to time, I would do workshops, master classes, and eventually, I then did I did a series on television, on independent television called Masterclass with Julian Joseph, or something like that, or Jazz Masterclass. I can't quite remember the title. And then after that, I did some more presenting with my name in the title. And then, I had written my second opera for a company called HMDT Music. Adam Eisenberg and Tertia Sefton Gray came and asked me, if I wanted to write children's opera. So that was my second opera. We did that. And then later on, they said to me, were you serious when you said you'd like to start your own school? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So about 8 years ago, I started my own school called the Julian Joseph Jazz Academy, which we called JJJA. There was a build up to it. I'd been doing a number of things, and then JJJA managed to create a focus for me. And I was just reflecting today as I left the academy this evening on how great it was to hear a 14-year-old kid playing just for fun, because he loves the music of Horace Silver, playing Horace Silver's tunes, playing tunes by a fantastic South African composer and pianist, a great friend of mine called Becky Mseleku, just a whole selection of tunes. And I was just saying, well, you know what? If I create an academy, that's really what I wanted to do. And the kids in my class had just played a really great set. And many of these kids had been with me since they were 10 years old. So seeing them now at 18 and 19 and older, it was an amazingly gratifying feeling. So, it's just all kind of rolled together. I've been very fortunate. In fact, Marcelo Bratke, who I know was the recommender of me as the guy he knows. He came and really inspired our kids. It's a jazz school, but he played some Chopin. He played a range of things, and we have some really talented classical players in the academy too. And so we heavily encourage their learning of different types of music, particularly, Occidental music, classical music. So it's been, a journey, and it's been quite a journey to get there, to get there.
How do you balance it all out?
You just balance it, man.
It's tough to balance.
Well, it's Christmas time now, isn't it? We're on Christmas break. So
yeah.
I've got time. I've got time to do loads of things. I'll send them a list of things that I think they need to learn, and we at full capacity, we have about 70 kids, and it's, it gets affected by the whole, topsy-turvy place we find ourselves in now, with locking down and not locking down, and whichever phase we're in. Most of this term we were under lockdown, and then so the last 2 weeks we could do face to face. Yeah, I mean, I just do the broadcasting, I do the education, I do the composing, I do the gigs, and at this time, to have any of it is a real blessing. I'm really, really fortunate that, that I have these areas that I deal in, because, as one wanes, the other takes its place, and the other takes its place. And it's just a kind of revolving group of things that, I'm able to do.
Have you noticed with COVID and not doing face to face and having to do, and I'm not sure, but online, the attitude of the students change, or the style, or not being able to practice?
Well, the thing is that your engagement with them has to change when you go online. So playing together is quite difficult because of the lag. And so I just changed the program, really, and instead of us working on tunes sort of in person, then I can get them either to work at home, or say, go away for 15 minutes, work on this, and come back and let me hear what's going on. Or we do this thing that I love to do, called line exchange. So because I have them all learning solos, I say, pick a line from one of the solos you've been learning and teach it to us. So we get through about one week, we got through about 9 or 10 lines in one session. And we have our session goes from 2:30 to, actually properly, from 2:30 to 3, we have a warm up, which I call the oobly dooblies, where we just all go oobly doobly and do like improvising, and we go from one person to the other. So everyone gets their moment. At 3, we start class. I have about 5 classes, or 5 groups with 4-5 teachers. Yeah, so in mine, from 3 until 5:30, we'll be doing line exchange. So everybody just shows, some kind of linear thing that they've got from Bud Powell or Harold Land, or, Errol Garner, or whoever, Herbie Hancock. So we do that, and it just gets them to build a compendium of things to work on and things to absorb into their playing. So yeah, you just have to change the program up and make sure that it works in that context. But I'm a jazz musician. I'm supposed to be like that. I'm supposed to be able to be malleable, right, Hayden? That's what we're supposed to be able to do. Just alter ourselves.
Zoom improv.
There you go. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
What about, going back to COVID? You're a musician. You gig. What do you think's going to be happening? Do you have any predictions of, when we can get back together to see live music?
Well, you've observed how quickly our government is prepared to trust the vaccine and get it out there. So, our medical boards have passed certainly the Pfizer vaccine. And I think with that, people are going to be getting back together. It's going to take a little while to unroll it. So probably a few months in, March, April, May. And then I think we're going to start to feel some semblance of normality return. I think once the hospitals and realize or achieve a way to stop people from dying from it, then the fright will start to disappear. Will start to dissipate. And we'll know that we've got a handle on it and that people aren't dying from COVID. So, yeah, I think it's going to take a few months. Now, I'm saying a few months. It's always going to be twice as long as that. Whatever I can predict, it'll probably be twice as long. So I'm just being optimistic. So
I'm kind of curious. I know North America, especially the States, has a view of vaccine, and it's 50% of the people, from what I hear in polls, are for it, 50% are against it. Is there a difference in London?
I think there is a strong anti-vax group and campaign. I think there's a general suspicion with anything that is kind of mass programmed. But here in Britain, we have the flu jab and nothing is compulsory. You get the flu jab, if there are underlying conditions. But if they don't see that you have underlying conditions and you're healthy, then you're not offered it. But if you want it, you can always get it. So I think there's less suspicion here, but there is definitely a faction of mistrust with anything governmental. But it depends on what paradigm you live in, whether you live in a paradigm of trust or whether you live in a paradigm of suspicion, and what things have happened in your life to support either one. I think over here, my rose-tinted glasses make me think that there's a higher percentage of trust, even though, our government has come up for a lot of criticism, rightfully so. But I think generally we're not probably as suspicious as in North America.
Yeah, I think you're right. North America right now, I think it's probably even higher. The polls that I hear are 50-50, but I think it might even be higher on the other side. So we're not so much on the rose-tinted glasses yet, but
sure. But I think logic and percentages tell me, if your research comes from you not being an expert, reading things that are more opinion than research, as opposed to people who are scientists and studying, then really it's just, I think I'd go with the scientists, I'd go with the scientists.
Yeah.
That's what logic tells me, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
You got to put your trust somewhere.
Yeah, you do.
So now let's talk about some fun stuff. We just touched on it, but the Julian Joseph Jazz Academy. So I want to know what makes this unique or different from other performance studios.
Okay, so what was my motivation, I guess, for starting the academy? Well, a lot of kids who get to college to study jazz in particular, I just found that often their engagement with jazz in any real deep way would start at college. And I thought, well, that's too late. That's too late to start, your jazz education, so to speak. You can see my friend Sahana in the background. Yeah, but so really, I thought, if at the very least, when youngsters who come to me go to college having experienced the music, the repertoire, so the music in terms of hearing, the repertoire in terms of playing of Jelly Roll Morton, through all of the greats, Benny Goodman, Duke Ellington, Charles Mingus, Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, all the way through up to at least, present day people, whether it's, Harry Connick Jr. or Brad Mehldau or Roy Hargrove, then at least I'd have done a service to the music where the contingent of kids who come through me have a love for the music and an active engagement in the music from its beginnings all the way through to its contemporary interpretations. Then that was really what the point was. Where we're slightly different from most of the programs that run, certainly in Britain, is that we do everything by ear. We don't use a stitch of music. It's ear and memory. So that's the difference. That's our unique selling point.
Very good. Hayden, you're so quiet. You
curious,
gotta ask some questions.
Yeah. To set up a program like that and to have kids sign on, I think to a lot of people that might sound a bit peculiar to not use any sheet music, right? Like with my background, I understand exactly why you do that, but
because, well, you'll understand this, Hayden, and hopefully, I'm sure Norm will definitely relate to it. Most programs deal with music. Most of the kids who come to me go to other programs. So where music, written down music is always the primary focus. The eyes are always the primary focus. My program is really making the ears the primary focus, not negating the use of the eyes at all, but, putting the focus on the ears. That's really what it is. And the parents, we have a very close relationship with the parents. They can call me at any time. They know that I know who their kids are. And I'm very open with the children too. They can call me, they have access to me, and they have access to all of the tutors. And we like it like that because we know that the kids will practice. I say kids, they go from the age of 8 up to 24, sometimes even in higher. They know that openness and that ability to be able to reach any of us, ask questions, have programs of practice for them, available for advice when they get a bit frustrated, also just support them. They realize that this is a valid approach to music because their underlying one-on-one lessons are all about reading. Many of the programs, I'd say 100% of the programs they go to are all about reading. My one just isn't. It doesn't focus solely on reading. It focuses with a high percentage of using the ear, listening, and memorization. And also developing something that I call jazz intelligence, which is understanding, how intervals are used, and also how, what chord qualities are, and developing that side of things so that you can respond to music on the moment. Reading music is not playing music. It's learning music. It's a way of learning, but music is experiential. So I'm just trying to bridge the gap that often gets left to the student's own initiative. Now, in order to make this work, it relies heavily on the students using their own initiative and seeing what it is that I'm trying to teach them. So I do spend quite a lot of time philosophizing about the music with them. So I completely take your point, Hayden, but I guess that's my justification. And I know I'm preaching to the converted, excuse me.
Yeah.
So this sounds like it led to your book, Music of Initiative.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the book is really about sort of getting into a bit of jazz philosophy. It's about developing a sense of empowerment and a sense that inside all of us, and this probably goes for every subject anyway, the answers that we seek lie within us. All we have to do is ask ourselves and answer ourselves. So often it's, if I put a simple question like, how do I learn to play jazz? That's a really, really big question. So how do you answer that question? So logically, you'd think, one, I need to find out what jazz is, or I need to understand what my understanding of jazz is. So if your understanding of playing jazz is a fusion group, then you have to learn the repertoire of the fusion group that you really think is playing jazz and try and do that. In turn, that will lead you to either unfurling or uncovering what jazz really is about, or what learning really is about. But in the book, I also say that understanding what jazz is understanding who its greatest players are, the people who make the music something you celebrate. So you'd have to know Louis Armstrong, you'd have to know Charlie Parker, you'd have to know Charles Mingus, Bill Evans, Jerry Mulligan. You'd have to know those guys. Once you get familiar with what actually it is and who plays it, then it's about you figuring out how to get to it. Understanding how to play, you either go to a teacher, you either have initiative or enough learning yourself to kind of figure some stuff out yourself. But I think it's all a journey of self-discovery. Some of it, you're going to need some big, major help from other people. Some of it, you're going to figure out yourself.
Okay.
All of it, you're going to figure out.
All of it.
Yeah.
Another question is, what makes a good jazz educator?
Well, I often think a good jazz educator is a guide to understanding the talent of the child or the person trying to learn the music, and guiding them, to processes that help them empower themselves and teach themselves. That's what I think a good educator is, a good jazz educator.
Every place that you've played, where was your favorite spot? What was your favorite place to play?
Gosh, that's a difficult question because I played so many places.
Yeah.
Gosh. I think without a shadow of a doubt, the favorite places are always where the people are warm and kind to you, where there's, you play a concert and then you meet the people and you go out into the community and you eat and you talk about things and you make close bonds with people. And I've done that quite a bit, I'd say, throughout Italy, in France, in Australia, in Japan. So I don't think I could isolate one place and think, oh my God, I like the architecture here, but it's always about the people. I think it's always about where you meet, warm-hearted, receptive people who, just either you make a human connection with. They don't even have to love the music you make. You just make some kind of poignant connection with them, and you connect with them on some human level.
That's it for part 1 of our interview with Julian Joseph. Make sure to tune in later this week for the rest of the interview. As always, follow us on social media and like the podcast wherever you listen to it. It really helps us out and keeps you in the know with all things I Know This Guy. That's enough for me, and I'll see you next time.